Transcending history and the world, a tale of souls and swords, eternally retold.
What's going on, everyone? This is Ace, and welcome back to The Reckoning. And today we are going to be checking out the many powerful, deadly, and of course, blood-drenched weapons Lady Death has wielded over the years. But before we begin, if you enjoy content on Lady Death, stories from the Coffin and Chaos universes, badass characters, or just dark fantasy, then you are exactly in the right place. And while you're here, feel free to give the video a like, hit the subscribe button, don't forget to click the bell as well. And as always, your support really helps the channel out. So kicking off, let's jump into the freshly printed pages of Lady Death's most recent story to date with the 2023 Lady Death Cybernetic Desecration. And in this tale, Lady Death is thrown into an alternate future Earth, and this universe's version of Lady Death, she has become the all-powerful Empress Death. The Empress is on an unwavering onslaught for Megadeath, or in other words, the end to all life. Now, upon her arrival to this bleak and strange universe, Lady Death gets caught in the crossfire between Empress Death's soldiers and a group of the only remaining resistance. Lady Death recognizes one of the members of this resistance as one of her companions, at least back in her own universe, Zack the Zombie Exterminator. Now, in this universe's version of Zack, he is about to be killed by a character known as Cascade, but Lady Death lunges toward her and stabs a blade right through her face, killing her instantly. A little while later, Lady Death will bend down and grab Cascade's rifle, but upon touching the weapon, Lady Death is engulfed by a combination of metal and electricity. It's stated that Cascade's armor will mold itself to whoever touches it, and in this case giving Lady Death her new battle gear, but also her most latest weapon, simply named Throat Cutter. Now, very little is known about this weapon so far, as it is really new, but it would seem that it cuts through the bodies like butter, and there is a constant flow of electricity that more than likely gives the victim a shock upon piercing. Lady Death is also able to use this electricity in many ways, making the weapon all that more lethal and diverse. Some examples are she can use it as a type of gun, blasting shots at opponents. Secondly, the electricity can be extended as a beam, shocking multiple enemies at once. And finally, can be constructed into a type of shield, blocking powerful attacks from enemies. Oh, and just as a side note, it appears it can also act as a flashlight, which is kind of handy little feature in itself. So, you know, Lady Death doesn't have to utilize her iPhone flashlight and save some of that battery life. But anyways, continuing on. Next, let's go ahead and talk about Sinister. Now, Sinister is a small, light blade designed specifically to be used left-handed, and while much smaller than all of Lady Death's other blades, Sinister still packs a hefty punch to its victims. So for context, at this point in Lady Death's story, she is alive. Yes, you heard me correctly, alive. Our lady is mortal once again. But unfortunately for her, she happens to run into Morgana, who was the Grim Reaper's previous avatar of death, before Our Lady, whom we all know and love. Morgana was imprisoned for thousands of years and now released and ready to enact her vengeance. Long story short, this puts her in combat with Lady Death, and the battle doesn't turn out so well as Morgana is able to break Lady Death's hand, making her unable to wield a weapon. Before Morgana can finish off Lady Death, the Grim Reaper intervenes, opening a portal for Cremator, Blacksmith to Hell, Vandala, a Valkyrie and Lady Death's sister, and of course Ravenheart, the ex-angel of death Azrael, to rescue her in the nick of time. Brock, an Asgardian troll and longtime friend of Lady Death and blacksmith to Odin himself, created a special metal gauntlet to help heal Lady Death's broken hand, and in addition was the one who created Sinister. Now, as mentioned earlier, while the blade looks small, with the use of chaotic energy, the blade can transform into a kusarigama, a scythe-like weapon chained to an impact weight, which Hope can have the chain be capable of stretching as far as necessary for the weapon to reach her enemy. Like Apocalypse, it's linked to Lady Death so it can be summoned upon her will. Speaking of Apocalypse, let's move on to one of Lady Death's most powerful swords, forged by the one and only Cremator. her so much. One of these days, I'm going to have to write a cremator story. And, well, just in case any of you guys are interested in cremator yourselves, I did create a video on him, which you can find. I'll probably link it up in the corner here, so you should see it on screen, or if not, probably down below as well. Feel free to check it out. But anyways, to give you context, Lady Death has just finished being one of the horsemen of the apocalypse and is now on Earth battling Leviatha, first wife of Lucifer, and a Chaos Lord herself. You see, what's happening is Lucifer has taken several of his most powerful and loyal soldiers to Earth to make our world the new hell. This includes the likes of Astaroth, Pagan, Seance, and Cremator, who is under Lucifer's mind control at this time. They have all set up shop in Las Vegas, aka Sin City, and begun building the Lucifer engine, which will help them in the inevitable war with heaven. But upon reuniting with Lady Death, Cremator is able to break free from Lucifer's control, but is going back to infiltrate Lucifer's keep, acting as though he is still an ally to the evil Chaos Lord. Tricking Seance and Pagan, Cremator is able to overpower them and get close enough to the Lucifer engine to begin destroying it. He molds the door shut and begins to muster his power and strength, calling upon the ancient flames.
I, Cremator, blacksmith to the fallen lords of hell, call upon the fire of Vulcan's forge, Thunderer, Waymaker, Galilee.
He proceeds to not only destroy the machine with his bare hands, but from it forge a mighty weapon of pure chaos energy that could kill demons and chaos lords alike, which he dubs Apocalypse. The sword is much stronger than Lady Death's previous sword, Nightmare, and personally, thank God, because as we will get into it later in this video, I am not the biggest fan of Nightmare. Jeez. The most unique element of Apocalypse, and also probably what makes it so powerful, is the summoning of chaos energy to strengthen its owner. Several times Lady Death has been able to concentrate enough chaos energy when using the blade that she was able to repel attacks from opponents that were superior in power. Now around this time, shortly after, Lady Death would utilize another weapon that, while is not a permanent weapon of choice and really only uses it from time to time, as its owner is Death, or in other words, the Grim Reaper. It's an incomparably powerful weapon that is intrinsic with the image of Death. And during the Judgment War arc, the Reaper approached Azrael, the Angel of Death, who, although a heavenly being, is overall compelled to serve the Reaper. And it is at this time that Death will not only task Azrael to align himself with Lady Death against the forces of heaven and hell, but to also keep safe Death's eternal scythe and give it to Lady Death for her to wield. And wield she will. During the battle between Lady Death's forces and Hell's armies, she finally takes up the scythe, calling for Azrael to give her the mighty weapon. Not only does this make her incredibly powerful, but because she chose to take up Death's scythe of her own free will, the horsemen of the apocalypse, war, pestilence, and famine have now offered their power and allegiance to her. This completely changes the tide of the war, as adding these four powerhouses to her ranks causes Lucifer and Hell to retreat for the time being. Lady Death is victorious and her armies yell and cheer for victory. The Eternal Scythe has the ability of destroying large numbers of opponents such as lesser demons and possibly angels with just a single wave. The weapon can also utilize arcane and necro energy to cause massive destruction to buildings, structures alike, and of course, being the Reaper's scythe can take the souls of the living and or undead. The weapon was the only way to defeat Purgatory when she had obtained her god form, and Lady Death utilized the scythe to finally cast her into oblivion, or at least for the time being. Now moving on to the second blade that Lady Death wielded, simply known as Nightmare. And while it has a badass name, this sword is probably my least favorite of all of them. The sword would literally bite down and suck the blood of Lady Death, or really anyone who wishes to use the vampiric blade, and in return would be a powerful tool for her to utilize, but over time, it became such an annoyance. It can talk, and so would constantly fight with Lady Death, sometimes refusing to cooperate unless it got more blood, which would put Lady Death in harm's way. Not only this, but at times the blade would tap into Lady Death's aggression, bloodlust, and overall combatant tendencies, which would give her the advantage in battle, but would also make her a huge dick to people she cared about, and honestly made her character unlikable at times. The weapon was made by Brock, the Asgardian blacksmith who I mentioned earlier. During the Crucible, Lady Death and the Valkyries of Asgard are defeated and captured by Lord Genocide, and Brock has taken her sword Darkness and melted it down so that the new sword could be created. The mold and direction for this sword was the idea of the Allfather Odin, who gave instructions to Brock to create a sword when the time had come. With Asgard in ruin, Odin's death, and Lady Death in trouble, Brock decides that now would be that time. The blade being combined with Asgardian magic, Hell Steel, and other enchantments is how we birth Nightmare. Once again though, I actually was kind of upset with Brock throughout the pages of Lady Death's story because of how awful this blade was. I mean, he has redeemed himself, since then, but yeah, it was just absolutely infuriating at times. And it is true that while he is the creator, he emphasized that he had no idea about some of the properties of Nightmare, as a lot of the direction was coming from Odin. Now, I don't believe currently the sword is wielded by anyone, but the weapon would end up for a time in the hands of the blood goddess Purgatory. And actually, I loved this matchup. Both consistently never satisfied and always craving either it be blood or power, and seeing as Purgatory being a blood goddess, and could supply the sword with as much blood as it desired, and in return could assist her in her lust for power. But they were too much at odds with each other and ultimately defeated by Lady Death. Some other key elements of this sword is, if killed or wounded, the blade will attempt to absorb your essence. Having your soul trapped within it, you will be slowly digested by it as time goes on. It has countless warriors engulfed within inside it, and it preys upon them. It's overall a cursed sword, and while powerful, only those willing to endure its shackles should be wary of making an alliance with it. Up next we have Chaos, and Chaos is a special sword as it is the first weapon given to Lady Death upon her first entry under Coffin Comics. After a forced 20-year hibernation and the loss of her sword Apocalypse, Lady Death is back in Hell and greeted by her old friend and blacksmith Brock, who gave her a new sword he named Chaos. He mentions the sword being made of elements perfect for use in the underworld, and that it is a blade unlike any other. The weapon can inflict not only harm to its inhabitants of Hell, but it dispatches them to a place called Oblivion, which is essentially a worse realm of no return. While this would be a concern for demon and hellborn alike, for the damned souls suffering within Hell, they crave and beg to be stricken by the blade, as to end their eternal suffering. With all this into account, Chaos is a sword that is known and feared throughout Hell, for it is a symbol of the end. It is death arriving for the realm, which, when put in that way, seems like the perfect match to pair with the return of Lady Death. Now finally, the OG, the original, and also my personal favorite, Lady Death's first blade that she wielded against Lucifer and his armies, the weapon simply known as Darkness. It's a hellish blade in that its complete construct is made from the realm, and its finest blacksmith, Lady Death's closest friend and mentor, Cremator. The sword was made to kill demonkind and is able to blast arcane energy at opponents. The blade is a conduit for those who wield it, and in Lady Death's case, the weapon becomes incredibly powerful, as the one true rule of Hell is that in Hell, desire equals power. And Lady Death has shown her desire to be unmatched by any other being. Together, Darkness and Lady Death have endured many battles and have taken many lives of her victims. Now I will take this time to make some editorial changes due to the nature that there are some continuity issues that were never really addressed. So just to let you know, this is how I've worked it into the Lady Death canon. During the time Cremator and Lady Death building their alliance and future friendship, she commands him to make her a sword to vanquish her father Matthias, a powerful sorcerer who is damned to Hell but who at this time was spearheading a civil war in Hell against Lucifer. After several days of forging the weapon, Cremator explains to Lady Death that this sword will share similar properties for her as do all weapons that Cremator makes, in that it cannot be used against her. If ever lost or needed, Lady Death can summon the sword or it will always return to her. Now, the weapon is not indestructible, as it has been broken by none other than Lucifer himself, as well as melted down by Brock, as we mentioned earlier in the video. Cremator to this day has deemed Darkness his finest creation, and it is truly the infamous weapon of Lady Death, and arguably her most iconic weapon. Now, ending off on a side note, there is one other origin of darkness that I will go ahead and deem not the origin of Lady Death's blade, but perhaps a predecessor that possibly was wielded by her father Matthias and or Lucifer. It's stated that the sword was created by Cremator years before Lady Death entered Hell. From whom or what purpose Cremator created it is unknown, but it is said that its making is related to the scar on his chest. This mysterious blade is essentially a conduit for its bearer's power. And with that said, I will deem this blade as Dusk. And there you have it. That is all of Lady Death's weapons and swords that we've come to know over the years. I will say, just as a side note, this is just covering the Chaos universe and the modern day Coffin universe. I did not go into the medieval Lady Death storylines or the Boundless / Avatar, just because I'm not fully well versed in those universes, still trying to chip away when I have time. So yeah, maybe that'll be a addition or later video in the future. Honestly, I really hope you guys have enjoyed this one and the many awesome blades that Our Lady Death has used over the years, as well as getting a little insight on several of her adventures and tales over those years as well. I hope it encourages you to go and dive into her stories and her comics, or if you want me instead to go ahead and explore those for you. I am so down to do that as well. And if that is the case, please leave your comments down below, guys, and your ideas if there's anything or any elements of Lady Death's stories or any of the other characters of the Chaos universe or Coffin universe. Please let me know and I'll definitely try to get on it and share it with you guys. I always love reading your guys' support and just getting a chance to talk with you about Lady Death or other stories with you guys. So as always, thanks so much and stay tuned for another video as there's still lots and lots to cover. And yeah, until next time, guys, take care.